Welcome, travelers of Middle-earth, to a journey into shadow and secrecy, where we shall unravel one of the lesser-known mysteries of Mordor. Today, we turn our gaze to the Watchers of Cirith Ungol, those grim and immovable sentinels who guarded the high pass into Sauron's domain. Were they mere statues of stone, imbued with a sorcerer's will, or something far more sinister? Their presence hints at an ancient and forgotten power, an evil that predates even the War of the Ring. Let us embark on this path where few have dared tread, and discover the true purpose of these silent sentinels. The Watchers stood at the very gate of the Tower of Cirith Ungol, an outpost originally built by Gondor after the War of the Last Alliance, sometime in the early years of the Third Age. Its purpose then was to keep watch on the shadows that still lurked in the land of Mordor. But, as with many strongholds of men, time and treachery took their toll. By the latter years of the Third Age, it had fallen into the hands of Sauron's forces. Its vigilance turned inward, not to keep foes from entering Mordor, but to prevent any from escaping its grasp. The two Watchers, as Samwise Gamgee encountered them, were monstrous figures seated upon thrones, each with 3 fused bodies and vulture-like heads facing outward, inward, and across the gate. Their hands, claw-like and massive, rested upon their knees. They seemed unmoving, as if hewn from black stone, yet a dreadful will resided within them. When Sam attempted to pass through the archway beneath their gaze, he felt as though he had run into an invisible wall, an unseen force barring his way. These were no mere sentries of flesh and blood, nor even of the common sorcery employed by the Dark Lord's minions. It is clear that the Watchers were infused with a spirit of malice and vigilance, a power that extended beyond the normal craft of men or orcs. They forbade entry to intruders, but more importantly, they prevented escape. Even after Sam defied their presence with the Fial of Galadriel, their power was not fully vanquished. As he passed through, he felt their attention snap back, and with a shrill, piercing cry, they alerted the entire tower to the intrusion. This was no mere alarm system. It was a malevolent intelligence, bound to the stone itself, ensuring that none could come or go unseen. But what were they? Theories abound, yet one thing remains clear. These Watchers were not of Orcish or even Númenórean making. Their presence suggests an older, more primal power. Could they have been creations of Sauron himself? Perhaps a perversion of some older form of Elvish or Maiar craft? Or were they remnants of Morgoth's own dark sorceries, akin to the fell spirits that inhabited the Barrow Downs? The answer may lie in the very foundations of the tower they guarded. Their nature hints at a more ancient and insidious design, one that suggests they were not merely statues but spirits bound into stone. Perhaps echoes of the same dark sorcery that gave rise to the Barrow-wights of Eriador. The great enemy Morgoth in the First Age twisted many spirits into malevolent forms, enslaving them to his will. While Sauron was his chief lieutenant, he too learned the arts of ensnaring spirits into objects. As evidenced by the Rings of Power, could the Watchers be an extension of this craft? Entities once independent, but now shackled into a lifeless form, forever cursed to serve as the wardens of this dreadful tower. If so, then they were not merely magical constructs, but spirits of some forgotten origin, tormented and trapped, their will bent to Sauron's command. This might explain the overwhelming sense of dread they radiated. Sam Gamgee, no stranger to fear by that point in his journey, recoiled at their presence. Even his indomitable hobbit spirit quailed under their gaze. Frodo, though senseless in his captivity, was still bound by their influence, unable to cross the threshold on his own. It was not just the force of their will barring him. It was as though his very presence was weighed, measured, and deemed unworthy of passing without leave from their unseen master. Yet there was a way to defy them. When Sam raised the Fial of Galadriel, the light of Eärendil's star pierced the shadow they wove about themselves. This hints at a deeper truth about their nature. They were not merely bound by enchantments of strength, but by a darkness that recoiled from the purity of the light. If they had been mere statues, ensorcelled with a warding spell, then such a force would have been impervious to the light of a single star, even one as powerful as Earendil's. But the fact that they shrank from it, that their presence momentarily faltered, suggests that whatever dwelled within them was something that feared the light, as all creatures of darkness do. This revelation casts their true origin in an even darker shade. Were they akin to the unseen? The spirits that wove themselves into shadows and haunted the forgotten places of Middle-earth? Or were they something more? An experiment in domination wrought by Sauron himself, a means of binding spirits into a physical prison that could neither move nor flee, yet would serve in eternal vigilance? If so, then the Watchers of Cirith Ungol may have been more than mere sentinels. They were victims, souls twisted and bound beyond death, trapped in eternal service to the Dark Lord. Even more disturbing is the question of what happened to them after the fall of Sauron. Did they dissolve into nothingness as the ring was destroyed, their torment ended? Or did they remain, silent as ever, watching over a ruin that no longer needed their gaze? If they were bound spirits, then it is possible they lingered, lost without a master, echoes of a power that once held Middle-earth in its grip. The Watchers, whatever they truly were, remind us that the shadows Sauron cast were not always visible, but were no less dreadful for it. The Watchers of Cirith Ungol also raise an unsettling question about the nature of Sauron's sorcery. Unlike the Nazgul, who were bound by the power of the One Ring, or the Trolls and Orcs, who were bred for war, the Watchers seem to exist on the fringes of Sauron's dominion. Creatures neither wholly physical nor wholly spectral, bound to their place of vigilance. If they were spirits enslaved to stone, then Sauron's mastery of necromancy and domination must have been even darker than many assume. The Dark Lord was a master of control, not only of living things, but of those beyond life, turning the remnants of thought and will into instruments of his power. In this, the Watchers might have been among his most insidious creations. Their existence suggests that Cirith Ungol was more than just a stronghold. It was a place of containment, a trap from which none could flee unaided. The orcs who garrisoned the tower were themselves prisoners of Sauron's will, but the Watchers were the true jailers. Even Gorbag and Shagrat, hardened soldiers of Mordor, seemed to regard the tower as a place of suspicion and dread. While they feared Sauron, there is little evidence that they truly understood the Watchers, only that they knew the gate could not be breached by ordinary means. This is what makes Samwise Gamgee's defiance so remarkable. In his desperation to save Frodo, he did what few, if any, had ever done before. He challenged the Watchers and passed through. His courage and the light of the Fial were enough to break their spell, if only for a moment. Yet even then, they remained powerful. When Sam fled with Frodo, the Watchers screamed, sending an alarm that rippled through the tower, awakening the last of its defenders. It is telling that they did not merely sound a bell or raise a voice. They shrieked with a force that seemed unnatural, as though the very air carried their warning. This was not the cry of a beast or a creature of flesh, but something deeper and more terrible, a sound that carried malice woven into its essence. And then there is the moment of their final defiance. As Sam and Frodo made their escape, the Watchers attempted to bar their way a second time, drawing on what power remained to them. Yet here another force intervened, a shadow in the sky, vast and winged. It was the Nazgul, descending upon Cirith Ungol in haste. And with its coming, the Watchers' power faltered. This is perhaps the most mysterious moment of all. Why did the approach of a ringwraith silence them? Were they lesser spirits in Sauron's hierarchy, compelled to bow before the Nazgul as enforcers of a greater will? Or did they recognize that their purpose had been fulfilled, that there was no need to resist when a more terrible master was near? Whatever the truth, it is one of the few glimpses we have into the structure of Sauron's dominion, where unseen forces of terror and will struggled for supremacy even within the heart of his empire. This moment of uncertainty also raises another possibility, that the Watchers were not Sauron's own making, but relics of an older, darker power. If they were spirits bound to the stones, could they have been remnants of Morgoth's dominion, creations older than the tower itself? It would not be the first time that a dark place retained echoes of an ancient evil, long after its maker had passed from the world. If so, then Sauron did not create them, he merely bent them to his will, as he did with so many other things. And if that is true, then they may have been waiting there long before the tower fell into shadow, their purpose forgotten, their malice undiminished. The idea that the Watchers were remnants of an older power opens a door to even darker implications. If they predated Sauron's rule over Cirith Ungol, then what was their original purpose? The tower itself was built by Gondor after the War of the Last Alliance, around the early years of the Third Age, meant to be a vigilant outpost against the return of evil. Yet the Watchers do not bear the mark of Númenórean craft. They are something far older, more akin to the horrors of Angband than to the proud fortresses of men. If they were not placed there by Gondor, then were they uncovered? Had something ancient been lurking beneath the mountain, waiting for the coming of darkness to stir it once more? If this is the case, it would not be without precedent. Throughout Middle-earth there are places where the remnants of Morgoth's corruption linger, untouched by the passing of ages. The Barrow Downs, where spirits haunted the graves of long-forgotten kings. The dead marshes, where the echoes of slaughtered souls still shimmer beneath the water. And, of course, Dol Guldur, where Sauron reawakened the buried malice of an earlier age. The Watchers may have been something similar. Ancient spirits, bound to stone long before the first stone of Cirith Ungol was laid. If Sauron found them, he may have simply bent them to his will, repurposing an older evil to serve his own dominion. Yet the Watchers did not function like the Barrow-wights or the ghosts of the Paths of the Dead. They did not lure, nor did they attack. Their power was in their stillness, their vigilance. They were gatekeepers, not warriors, which suggests they were made, or enslaved, to serve a very specific function, to guard something, to trap something. If Sauron merely repurposed them, then what was their original charge? Could it have been to keep something else sealed away? Something that even the Dark Lord dared not release? This would align with the idea that the tower itself became not just an outpost of Mordor, but a prison. And if that is true, then the fall of Sauron might not have freed them at all. It might have left them trapped in purposeless vigilance, bound forever to guard a gate that no longer needed watching. Did they fade when the Dark Lord was unmade? Or do they still sit there, watching over the ruins of Cirith Ungol, waiting for a master who will never return? If they were spirits enslaved to stone, then their fate after Sauron's defeat is a mystery as unsettling as their existence. Without the will of the Dark Lord to guide them, were they unmade, or did they remain silent, watching, waiting? This is the final and most chilling question about the Watchers of Cirith Ungol. If they endure, then what do they await? Do they still bar the way, unwilling to yield to the passage of time? Or do they simply sit in the ruins, empty husks of a power long spent? The answers remain lost in the shadows of Middle-earth's history, a lingering darkness that even victory over Sauron could not entirely dispel. Perhaps one day, a traveler will attempt to pass through the ruins of the tower and find them still there, silent, unmoving, yet filled with the same malice that defied even the light of Eärendil's star. The fate of the Watchers after Sauron's fall remains an enigma, but their legacy endures in the whispers of those who remember the darkness that once held Middle-earth in its grasp. If they were spirits bound by sorcery, then it is possible that their existence ended when the Dark Lord was undone. His will was the great force that held together much of his empire, and when it collapsed, so too did many of his creations. Yet the Watchers were different. They were not orcs who fled or Nazgûl who perished in the fires of Mount Doom. They were something older, something deeper, perhaps tied to the very fabric of the land itself. If they did not vanish, then they may still linger in the ruins of Cirith Ungol, their purpose fractured but not erased. One can imagine a weary traveler years or even centuries after the War of the Ring, stumbling upon the broken remnants of the tower. The orc filth long washed away, the banners of Mordor tattered and forgotten. But there, seated at the ruined gate, the Watchers still remain, unmoving, featureless. yet filled with the same dreadful presence that once turned back even the bravest of warriors. Do they still guard? Do they still watch? And if so, who or what do they now serve? The Watchers of Cirith Ungol are a testament to the lingering power of Middle-earth's deepest evils. Whether crafted by Sauron, inherited from Morgoth's forgotten experiments, or born of something more sinister still, they represent a kind of terror that does not fade with time. They do not march upon battlefields or wield the cruel weapons of the orcs. Instead they wait, silent, patient, ever vigilant. They are the unseen horrors that lurk on the edges of the known world, the kind of darkness that does not burn away with victory, but lingers, unseen, in the places where the shadows have taken root. And so, as we turn away from Cirith Ungol and the grim sentinels that stand within it, we are left with the unsettling truth that some evils cannot be fully understood, nor entirely vanquished. They are part of the fabric of the world, woven into the very stones of Middle-earth. The Watchers may never move, never speak, never act, but they are there. And for those who dare to pass through the high pass of Cirith Ungol, they will always be waiting.